So the moraine must have slowed everyone down. Well, I have to admit, I'm from the state of Oregon, and I probably brought the rain down here because when I left, it was a deluge. So I have I'd like to thank my colleagues here from Lemongrass. I'm from Intel, and I thank them for the opportunity to co-present with them. So I sit on an engineering team at Intel, and our core focus, we actually have engineers that sit in Waldorf at SAP. And as we release new processors, we add new features into that have gone all the way up to also Plotner that into our processors. A couple of them historically that when you look at base systems, when you look at AWS based systems, 3 years ago they launched the X1, and that was based on the Intel Xeon E7 V3. At that time, what it had in there is it had a couple new features. Intel speaking, 5-letter acronym, ASNI, which is encryption that you can do at the database layer. And then also we added a feature called TSX, which sped up transactions by almost 500%. Now, you might be thinking, well, that was 3 years ago. Yeah, well, we've released more processors since then. Last year, we actually released, if you look here, codenamed Skylake, which is also known as the Intel Xeon Platinum processor on 14 nanometer was released last year. And then next year, we're going to release another processor codenamed Cascade Lake. And coincidentally, Cascade Lake, Intel, we're actually getting back into the memory business. But this memory thing is for servers, and obviously it fits right in the AWS kind of discussion I'll finish here with. But it's called Intel Optane DC Persistent Memory. And why it's revolutionary is we're going to have larger DIMM sizes. When you go buy DIMMs today, the biggest DIMM you can buy today is 128 terabytes. When those are available in the next couple of months, there'll be a half terabyte. So when you think in-memory database, that's a pretty big memory footprint. And then per socket, that'll be up to 3 terabytes. In addition to that, we're also going to drive down the overall total cost of ownership for memory. A data point that we've looked at internally at Intel is once you're looking at a large server, meaning an 8-socket based system, the memory is easily half, if not more, of the actual physical cost of buying that system. And obviously that plays right into, it costs more for those larger systems if you're an Amazon customer, right? So the other thing that's interesting with this new Optane DC persistent memory is since we're going to have larger memory footprint, we're going to drive down the cost, and we're adding this feature that's called persistency, okay? Now, when I think of persistency, I have to admit I'm an old database administrator myself, and systems administrator, and historically when I manage systems is you always fear, well, what was in the temp space, or what didn't get written, right? And it's even worse when you think about in-memory databases. Your whole columnar data store is in memory. So you have to have all sorts of disaster recovery, HA systems built up. And now with persistency, and there's actually a proof point that Hasso Plotner talked about at Sapphire this year, where they showed a 6 terabyte instance that with solid state drives going back to the SAN, it took up to 50 minutes to restart that server. But now with persistent memory, or in other words, non-volatile memory, it only took 4 minutes because they didn't have to rewrite the database. It's all there, powers off, you lose the data stays, you don't lose it. No rebuild necessary. So look for that to come out early next year, pretty revolutionary. It looks and smells like a DDR4 DIMM, but it has persistency, and then we're going to drive down the cost on that. So let's talk about Amazon and Intel. Like I said, 3 years ago, we came out with the X1, and that was announced at SAP TechEd 3 years ago, literally 37 months ago. And I remember that was a pretty big announcement. Initially, a lot of customers just did their test on the Amazon X1 cloud. And now what we're seeing is, and I'll actually show you an example here, a lot of customers are hosting not just the applications, but everything production in the cloud. So it's really evolved in the last 3 years. Additionally, X1E, that came out shortly thereafter. And if you go back to the X1, it only managed instances of Hana up to 1 to 2 terabytes. With X1E, it went up to 2 to 4 terabytes. And then, so that's all back on the Xeon E3. So that's 3-year-old processor, okay? When you look at the newer processors, the Skylake, they actually just released a new instance that's bare metal 8-socket, and I'm going to talk a little more about that. It's called the EC2 here in a minute. So if you look across the board, anywhere that's listed SAP is where you can do both Hana and the application layer. You know, whether it be S4, whether it be bare metal, whether it be business warehouse, you can all host that in Amazon Public Cloud. So what we see today is a lot of people, since when Hana's been in the ecosystem about 8-9 years, a lot of people are still doing the private hosting of Hana on-prem, but they're hosting their applications in the cloud. Well, AWS has been ready for a while, and we're seeing that there's a better outcome if you just host everything in the cloud. So, like I said, X1 came out 3 years ago. And initially, it only supported 16 gigabytes with a 16:1 GIB to vCPU ratio. And as you can see on the bottom, it only went up to 2 terabytes. And then shortly thereafter, on the E7 v3, we came out with the X1E version supporting Hana and other databases like SAP, like Oracle. And that went up to 4 terabytes. And as you can see, as we release new processors, since we have engineers that physically sit in Waldorf with the engineers that develop Hana, they're continually asking for new processor features that then get put into the processor, and then shortly thereafter, they're available in AWS. Now, at this TechAid on October 2nd, once again, it was actually here in Vegas, like it mostly is, they released the Skylake, or the Intel Xeon Platinum processor, which has been out for a couple months. But they released new instances that now scale up to 6, 9, and 12 terabytes. But what's powerful and what we've seen is initially when customers would go host stuff in the cloud, there's kind of the abstraction layer of the virtual machines, there were some performance hits. But with these new instances that they released just this year, we're actually seeing 60 to 70% performance gain versus the X1, X1E versions. So if you want the latest and greatest, look at the EC2, and it also gives you more ability to scale up higher, up to 12 terabytes. The other thing is it also has a new feature of flexibility that allows you to, if initially you think, well, my database is 2 terabytes, so 6 is probably good. If you want to then elastically scale it and then change it to a 9 terabyte instance, Amazon's done all the work to make that basically seamless, so you don't have to re-engineer your database to make it happen. So that's also a new feature in there. And in terms of the management and the full suite, it's all similar in there that you've grown to expect from Amazon. So, like I said, with EC2, it's now a bare metal instance. So basically, you go to Amazon, you pay for your instance, sign up for the contract, and you get bare metal systems that are hosted in the cloud. And I think of that, well, you don't have to go buy these, let's be honest, they're easily a $100,000 system because they're 8-socket systems. You scale to the 12 terabytes, and then you can bring your Hana instances up very quickly and then run your application layer, whether it be S4, ECC on top of that, or BW, or Business Warehouse. So this kind of gives you kind of historically, if you look on the left of where the memory support is kind of forward-looking. I've already kind of run through some of these, starting at X1, X1E up to 4, and then just released last month, you can now either get 6, 9, or 12 terabyte instances. And as I've seen it, that'll handle about 95% of the workloads. There's only, I could probably name maybe 20 customers that are above 12 terabytes. And so the vast majority of you are going to be able to manage it on the EC2 today. And as you can see, there's the ... looking forward to next year with the new platform, the Intel Xeon Platinum which Amazon obviously continues to grow. And if you have questions on that, contact your Amazon rep to figure out where it's going to scale to next year. So with that, I will turn the time over to my esteemed colleague from Lemongrass, who, he actually told me prior here that he's a former SAP employee. So he's spent a lot of time in and around SAP product workloads, and he'll talk you through some of the scenarios. They're pretty much 100% all AWS system integrator for SAP. So with that,
thank you very much. So I, on the other hand, as you get judged by my accent, completely at home in the rain. So I'm in home territory here. So thanks for your time and thanks for coming in this afternoon and braving the weather. So a quick introduction about Lemongrass, who we are, what we do. So we're quite simple people. We just do one thing. We do SAP in AWS. And in fact, have been doing it longer than pretty much anyone. We started back in, although the company's been up for 10 years, 4 years ago, specializing in just AWS. In fact, took the first production customer live ever in Amazon back in 2014, 2015 era. We're a little bit different, as you've probably guessed as well, in that we focus purely on automation. And if you're familiar with SAP, you'll be acutely aware that it's typically a high maintenance, high touch point type of application. It's typically why it's the thing left in the corner. People may be a little bit scared to move because of the basis of the administration and the running and the operating. It's expensive to run, it's expensive to operate. Now, the reason we focus on just Amazon is a lot of that can go away. And you've seen from the keynotes and from a lot of the conversations going on in these wonderful sessions, the ability to automate is staggering. And I was sitting there with the keynotes from Werner washing over them this morning, thinking, my goodness, just keeping up with that ecosystem is just incredible, the rate of innovation coming through. So that's the reason why we automate first. We don't like doing things twice. If we do, we will find a way to script, automate, build, and develop and deploy that. So we're a company of 150 people, relatively small in the scheme of things. We are growing aggressively, but that is the reason, that's the secret of how we manage to operate large enterprise customers simply through automating. Okay, I'm 100% on the corner in case you're wondering. We've never had any failures, outages, or problems in all the years that we've been running. And that, again, is testament to automating. You remove the human error and the human influence going wrong in there. So we've done this for a lot of organizations. Just a logo slide, and I know you've probably seen a lot of logo slides this week, but let's just pull out a few that might be pertinent here. So Cambridge University Press on the screen there. So this is an organization that bravely exited from their data center agreement before they found a complete solution. And we actually migrated over 200 systems in just 4 to 6 weeks. Now, that's faster than human hands can actually operate SAP. So again, automation was the secret of actually moving those systems over, operating those systems, and then managing them over. Similarly with Breitvik, okay, so again, an organization with a large SAP deployment, they've embraced some DevOps culture. They don't need to operate lots of non-production systems anymore because they can simply build them on demand. We're taking the Amazon EC2 automation, CloudFormation, all of the technology underneath, and then applying automation logic at the SAP layer. And in fact, we can spin up a production SAP cluster, so over 2 availability zones, with the latest version of Hana in about 27 minutes end to end. So really, in a traditional world where you've got to think about racking and stacking and building, that's gone with Amazon, but then you have to think about your basis and your build and your maintenance. And again, there's no need for that now by automating through that process. If you look on the website as well, on the Amazon portal, again, we're about the only people that have live SAP references up in the marketplace as well. So do take a moment to have a look at that. We're, and to use an Andy Jazzy phrase, a born-in-the-cloud organization. So what that actually means is we don't have office overheads. We tend to employ people and let them work from home. They're either at home or they're in customer sites. Keeps us lean, keeps us mean, keeps us honest. Means that we can scale as we need to very quickly. Lemongrass is predominantly a product company. So while we've got a bunch of super smart people that know SAP inside out, most of us in the organization have been doing SAP for 20-something years. So we've been around the ecosystem for a long time, but we're predominantly a platform company, driving the automation technology that allows this sorts of automation and this sort of development, okay? So development centers spread across the main global regions and presences in all the major geographical regions, from Asia-Pac right through the States, down to Australia and beyond there. So global presence, which is important. if you're running big enterprise customers such as the ones you saw on the previous screen there. So let's take a moment to think about what does this level of automation mean when you apply that to SAP. So take a look at the screen here, and you can see a simplified, typical example of an SAP production release landscape. You've got a dev, a test, and a production. Great, okay. So that's your release to production landscape, typically always on, typically, there's up and running and stable. No change there so far. Stay with me. If you go down the stack in a typical SAP landscape, you'll probably have a project track. You'll probably have a couple of training systems. You'll probably have a collection of sandbox systems. You'll probably then have a second project release track, just in case you've got two projects that maybe are running at the same time. This is normal stuff, right? So it ends up in this triangle shape, right? Bottom heavy, top light. Now, in the world of an AWS and automated world, that's not necessarily required. If you think of all the people needed to patch, maintain, operate, keep up and running, monitor those systems underneath, it gets very expensive very quickly. Okay, so some of the technology that can really drive a difference on this is when you start thinking about DevOps, as you can see on there. We've got infinite compute capacity, we've got instances on demand. So what the platform allows you to do is take a copy of production, clone that out into maybe a sandbox or a separate project track or whatever purpose that you need that for, run that for only the specific time that you need to do that task. And by the way, if you go home at 6 o'clock and not working over weekends, turn it off so you've got the scheduling. And at the end of that activity, release those transports and those updates back into the dev track. And the good news is that is because it's a copy of production, you know the template's up to date, crash the system. You only keep the system running as long as you need. So using principles like this, on average, we're knocking out 40 to 50% of the operating cost of SAP simply by allowing this automation. Yeah, it's a slightly different way of thinking. That also goes then when you think about system operations, sysops. So again, it's an intensive area in most organizations running SAP. Patching is often a swear word. Maintenance windows, trying to bring systems down, kernel patches, SAP patches, feature packs, enhancements and updates. Windows to do those changes in big systems and bring them up again. Often a challenge, which is why a lot of SAP systems sometimes lag behind the latest versions. So again, with Amazon technology and with the automation that we've developed on top, we can do near zero downtime patching. If you think of a typical SAP system, taking it down to patching it, checking that's okay, bringing it back up again, you've got a reasonable downtime window. In an Amazon world, we don't need to do that. We'll build a shell system on the side, so the next size that you need, the latest version that you need, the Linux patches that you need, whatever version you need to move to, get that system up and running in the background, use system replication, native application system replication to spit that across into the new system, and then we just simply switch the IP records at the top. So you're failing forward, you're always failing forward rather than going up and down. Sounds relatively simple, but it turns activities that can take weeks and months into suddenly only a few weeks of planning and a couple of minutes of downtime. So it's a fundamental change in the way you think. Equally, most SAP landscapes, people buy systems to grow into. You buy a great big Hana box and think, right, I've got 30-40% overhead. That feels about right because the organic growth of my system, yeah, that's good. And you're paying over the odds. So again, with automation, right size it. Same approach, same technology, buy exactly the size that you need, and then when you flick over to the next version, again, you'll just fail forward into that box with a few minutes of downtime. Again, takes off a lot of overhead on that capability. Finance operations, again, if you're buying physical boxes, if you have good bums on seats operating these systems, it gets pricey. So FinOps applications, we've got the ability with just a mobile application, you can see by the minute cost of exactly what you're doing, storage and compute. So we always like to see on the mobile app sort of a fine finger sort of graph where we know people are turning things off overnight or at weekends, and you can track against that. If someone turns a system on and leaves it up too long, you get an alert, so you get instant visibility on that as well. So again, really helps bring down the cost and the visibility of running those systems. And there's extra features like the ability to start and stop a system. So for example, if you have a system you only use occasionally, maybe it's an old archive system, leave it off. Just turn it on the mobile application when you need it. Also, developers have a wonderful habit we've experienced of creating loads of systems and never shutting them down. So again, we've built in idle shutdown capability as well. So if no one logs into the SAP system and it's been, let's say, 24 hours, it will turn itself off gracefully as well. So there's a few little things to think about there. And then lastly, things like BizOps. So optimized run scheduling. You'll often find that systems are left on continuously, so building schedules around what you do with the system, buying the right type of Amazon reserved instance or convertible reserved instance, looking at your buying strategy, looking at the way you use those systems, again, can save quite a large chunk of money that we've seen over conventional models. And then the last one, because all of this is automated, it means we can pass through updates and innovations that much quicker. In fact, the new S3 updates that we saw coming yesterday, the new platforms that Andy announced, we all got those working last night. Because we're just tapping into that API, we're tapping into native Amazon capability, we can pass that straight through on the platform. So for a lot of people that use our platforms, it means they've got instant access to new Amazon features. You see that actual cost of ownership curving down naturally as Amazon innovation curves through. So again, just another thing to think about versus buying a big box and CapExing that over a number of years. So I hope that made a little bit of sense. Drove you through a few things that drive adoption of SAP. Now, sort of zooming out to the wider view, we typically see in our experience sort of 5 waves, the way customers move into running SAP on Amazon. So the first wave is typically that genesis moment when they go, you know what, this cloud stuff makes sense. We get the reason for moving over. It fixes a pain point, it fixes a running cost issue, it fixes a performance issue. Move in, fantastic. The second wave, once that pain has ebbed and gone down, is then to look at automation. How can we adopt some of the things I just mentioned to actually bring down the way that we run, the way we operate, the culture in the company, and actually adopt innovation into what we do as an organization? It tends to be sort of that second evolution wave. Then what we tend to find is because people are now not focusing all their time, money, and effort on keeping the lights on, they start to think, okay, we can start looking at some of these innovation areas. So S4, if you're familiar with that, SAP's latest version, an innovation platform and an operating solution, you can start to look at S4 Hana. And guess what? We can get that up and running in about 10 hours end to end, including all the network security landing zones. Again, that's automated. So you can start looking at new SAP innovation technology. And that natively leads then into data lakes and machine learning and some of the SAP solutions, maybe Leonardo, that sit around that. So companies like Hana, we've been doing their data lake modeling around their SAP data, again, using S3. It's the obvious solution to do that. So that shows the evolution of typically where a customer will go as they go through that curve using Amazon. If you'd like to see or hear anything that we've just spoken about, grab me afterwards. Happily take you through a demo or show you something. Yeah? But now the most important person, a real person that's been through this, I'd like to hand over to John from Compass Group.
Of the use of, that's a little better, of the both the Intel products and Lemongrass services. So I'm with Compass Group, and for those of you that have never heard of us, which is probably all but 2 of you in the audience, we are probably the biggest food service company that you've never heard of. We are the world's largest food service and professional services, support services organization. The volume seems to be getting louder and louder. There we go. In the world. Worldwide, we are a $29 billion revenue organization, 500,000 plus associates, and we're in 50 plus countries. I'm not with the global entity, I'm with the North American entity, and we're a slightly smaller version of corporate. We're about just over 50% of the Compass Group total. With 17 billion in revenue, we service 99 of the Fortune 100 and serve over 9 million meals per day. Just think about that, 9 million meals a day. That's a lot of food. And we have just over 260,000 employees in North America that we perform weekly, bi-weekly, monthly payrolls for, all running through. We operate as a family of companies. So as I said, you've probably never heard the name Compass, but you've most certainly, if you've been in the hospital or in a college or university or a sporting event, or if you visited some of the business and industry folks that we service, like Amazon, for example, AWS, we do the food service and their headquarters. so you've most likely eaten our food. But we go to market as a family of companies. So these are several of the brands that we go to market under. Everything that we do in everything that we do, of course, the technical glitches have got to come from me. By the way, is the glare off my forehead too much for the audience? It's just good? All right. Everything that we do in the Systems and Technology group at Compass is centered around essentially three principles: enabling growth for the company, driving efficiencies for the company, and mitigating risk for the organization. So as with that in mind, sort of as the backdrop, that's the reason why we embarked upon migrating our SAP instance from on-prem to AWS in partnership with the Lemongrass team. When we started, our environment was running on I'll call it a legacy AIX platform, but we were leasing all of our infrastructure, so it wasn't exactly old or outdated. It wasn't 100 years old. It was a 3-year-old piece of equipment, but it's kind of expensive to be running the AIX platform on premise. We were running as our backend database, we were operating SAP off of Oracle on ECC6, non-Unicode, and it was consuming about 6 terabytes of our infrastructure. None of that was necessarily a problem in and of itself, except for the high costs and suboptimal RTO and RPO that we had with DR. And the bigger concern for us was inability to be agile in meeting our business partners' needs. If you can imagine a 6 terabyte instance of SAP and running on Oracle, on AIX hardware, if the business had something they wanted to do new or innovative and try a new line of services, for example, to offer to our customer base, it was kind of expensive to be spinning up multiple new instances. And if we weren't sure that we wanted to actually go to market with that business, it was a very expensive endeavor to stand up a whole new environment. And failing fast, as they say, would be failing very expensively. So those were the reasons, the main drivers. So as we decided that we were going to migrate away from that on-prem instance of SAP and try to solve some of those problems, particularly RTO and RPO for DR and our business agility issues, this is essentially the process that we went through, right? First, as the new guy to the company, because I don't know what the date is today, the 29th, I've been with the company for 18 months and 14 days, but who's counting, right? The first thing that we had to do, me and my new team, was secure senior executive buy-in. That obviously starts with our CIO, get him on board with the notion of doing anything. The intention before I got there, we were already underway of migrating off of the AIX hardware to on-prem systems, and we were discovering some road bumps. So we went through a process of revisiting all of our options, and we did that relatively quickly. Got the CIO on board, partnered with our business partners, obviously, to get them on board. Then we started the work to do the Unicode conversions and preparation work as we were working to identify who our AWS migration partner was going to be, and it ended up being our good friends at Lemongrass. Then obviously we did the contracting and all of that fun stuff. Once we were done selecting that partner and we had finished our Unicode conversion work, so that's kind of the asterisk, right? We did the Unicode conversion work before we kicked off our actual migration process. And from that point forward, it took us 12 weeks. We kicked off the project in February, and we went live production in July 13th, right, Scott? On AWS, yes, sir. Yes. Yes, the question was, in this process, did we migrate from Unix to Linux? And the answer is yes, we did. So we went from the AIX Unix environment, Oracle-based database platform. We migrated from that to, and my next slide will cover a little bit of what we went to, but we went from Unix to Linux, we went from Oracle to Hana, and we went from on-prem to the cloud. And in that 12-week period, essentially what we partnered with our friends at Lemongrass to do was the design sessions, migrated our dev environment, migrated our test environment, we call QAS, set up our DR infrastructure, and did multiple trial cutovers, and then we did our production cutover in just under, as it says, 4 hours from on-prem to the cloud. So we literally, over the course of a weekend, took SAP down and brought it back up. So we went a complete different version, right? We went from ECC 6 to Hana and non-Unicode to Unicode. Yes. Yes. Yes, sir. Yeah, I didn't hear the question. The target size of the Hana database? Yeah, so we were 6 terabytes on-prem, and then we're running in a 4 terabyte instance up in AWS with Hana. Yeah, so I don't know the exact number on the compression ratio. It varies based on what data you're going to have, right? What the Lemongrass team found in our particular instance is we had, I think they like to say, the largest payroll tables they've ever seen. So it would depend on the data that you have and what your table structures are and where your data is for the exact compression ratios. As I understand, so I can't quote an exact number, but in our case, yeah. So mapping our goals, right? Enabling growth, driving efficiencies, and mitigating risk to what our end state now is. We're obviously running on Hana with the Unicode version, ready for S4. We didn't migrate to S4 Hana at the time for 2 reasons. One, S4 HR wasn't yet available, and our business was not and is not calling for. They don't yet have the need or desire to go to S4. But we wanted to make sure that we got to Hana so that we would not be an impediment. When they are ready for S4, we will be in a better position to be able to go to S4 as opposed to staying on ECC 6 and Oracle, moving to Hana, or moving that just to the cloud and then having to go to Hana and then having to go to S4. We wanted to make sure that we could stay agile for the business, which obviously AWS gives us that agility, not just the ability to quickly go from Hana to S4, but the ability to spin up new instances if we need to. If the business wants to try a new line of business or a new business venture and they need a new environment, no longer do we have to reinvest in all of the hardware and slap it up in our data center and spin up a new version. We can simply use the tools in AWS, spin it up, and use it for as long as we need to, and then turn it back off. And obviously, we're on the X1 platform. So the question were, how many customizations did we have, and did we have additional modules? And the answer is, I don't know the exact number of customizations, but however many you can squeeze into about 20 years worth of having SAP on-prem, we had that many customizations. As many as you could possibly make in 20 years, that's how many we made. Yeah, so again, we're not on S4, we're on Hana, but the retrofitting that we had to do was the Unicode prep for all of those customizations, because a lot of those customizations were made over a number of years that didn't take into account going to a Unicode version. The other question was, did we have other SAP modules? Yes, we have tons of other SAP modules that, no. We didn't leave any on-prem, right? It was CLM, the CLM module that we had that we migrated up. Yes. Yes, you can. And in terms of business efficiencies, obviously now we're X1 plus Hana, which gives us increased speed. That again, our business wasn't necessarily chopping down our door, beating down our door for additional speed, but we as operating as that family of companies, our month end and our year end closing processes, as you can imagine, pulling in data from all of those different entities takes a long time. And there was a whole initiative to drive that closing process down and get it as optimized as possible, like the year before I got there. And just by virtue of moving to Hana and AWS, we were able to chop that month-end closing process down even further. So it wasn't the business driver for doing the migration, but it was a really nice intended consequence. We knew it was going to happen. We expected it to happen, but we didn't. That's not what we used to sell it to the business. And obviously, in terms of mitigating risk, we now have cross-region disaster recovery, right? So we're replicating across AZs, and our true DR is cross-region. So AWS is responsible for the Hana setup. So AWS is responsible for keeping the hardware running, right? We then went in our continued partnership with the Lemongrass folks for basis administration. We have some on-site basis administrators in-house, as well as partnering with the Lemongrass team. So AWS really isn't responsible for anything in this environment other than, God help me, keeping the AZs and the regions up and making sure that they continue to grow and build out and pass along the cost savings that our good friends in Intel, as they make the hardware and chips better, they keep driving down the cost. But that's essentially all that AWS is responsible for. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Oh, what backup tool? I don't actually know, Scott.
So Lemongrass actually, so we use them as a managed service. So they're managing the infrastructure and they're managing our basis administration. So currently we use CPM, which is Veeam's version of what's it called, file protection manager or something, and it's in the marketplace. But we're going to be moving to the MyCloud automated backup. And you guys have just bought a company called.
Yeah, so part of our platform innovation, we've actually built a backup module. So as part of the automation I was showing earlier, it includes a backup tool. So the backup can be used for obviously backing up the system, that's what it's there for, but it's also a tool that can be used to take that backup to build other systems as well. So it's a tool as well as a backup mechanism.
Yeah, you probably don't recall, but when Ben was speaking, there was a MyCloud component on one of his slides, and there's a number of add-on tools that the Lemongrass team has built into their platform that allows for a number of taking the level of services and components that are available through AWS and for lack of a better term, boosting them and creating additional efficiencies. And they're continuing to work on it. Eamon just walked in and they're building out their North American practice and investing a whole bunch of money in building out the development of that MyCloud application so that a lot of what Ben was talking about will continue to be much more efficient. So one of the next step for us in partnering with Lemongrass is to then continue to take advantage of those MyCloud tools so that basically the cloud formations process that we all are using to build our infrastructures out in AWS, so that if in a DR scenario we can just spin it up. The fail forward that Ben was referring to enables you to essentially point and click your way through their MyCloud tool to create a whole new environment, and then it basically uses your scripted out processes to build your fail forward environment, and then you patch and do whatever else you want to do. But that's what the MyCloud tool set enables us to do and continue to be built out. We still have it on-prem because the box hasn't yet had to be turned back in, but we've been live now for 4 months and we haven't touched it or done anything. We haven't gone back to it. When the lease is up on that equipment, it'll get powered down and sent back, but we're not referring back to it. The other thing that we did not do in our initial migration is archiving, which is, I'm sure you're all doing it better than we were. We basically have never archived anything. You know, we like to just keep everything and keep it live in the system. So we have a number of optimization opportunities in front of us by archiving and figuring out what data we need to actually keep, or what we can delete, and where we can put it, and where does it need to be available, and how quickly does it need to be available. So we'll be able to optimize our environment and again, drive down our costs, particularly for the dev and QA environments, by continuing to bring things down. So the beauty in this solution for us, particularly from a budgetary standpoint, is as the technical innovations continue right in AWS and the costs continue to go down, we're able to increase the agility and reduce our costs. Now, to be clear, all of what we've mapped out that we didn't save any money. But just imagine we went from on-prem to the cloud, and we went from an Oracle database to a Hana database on X1 environments with RTOs and RPOs that were measured in days and weeks down to RPOs and RTOs that are hours and minutes, in an environment that is now running Hana, so we're fully in memory with processing running much faster. So the benefits to us were not cost savings in this first phase, right? As we go forward, our costs will continue to go down and our service levels will continue to go up. But we basically looked at it as a wash. We weren't spending exponentially more, we're not saving exponentially less, but we're better prepared and positioned to support the business at this point. Any other questions? Because that's kind of where we are. We're done with the presentation point, but thank you for your questions. Yes, sir. So our test environment and our dev environment are on schedules that having been live now for 4 months, and this being our first major system that we moved, we're still refining and honing in on those schedules, but our test and dev environments do go down and come back up, and they are on schedules, but I'm not going to say that we have that optimized yet. I think we can still do a better job of setting the timing of when they're up and when they're down and when they're available and how quickly we spin them up. And by the way, that's part of the excitement that we have in terms of what our friends at Lemongrass are doing, because it should make that process even easier, so that, as Ben was saying, when you need a dev or test environment, you just spin it right back up using your production data and then spin it back down, as opposed to having your dev or test environments that you refresh the data into and you're spinning those up and down. Right now, they're persistent, and we spin them up and down when we need them, and we refresh the data at whatever intervals that we need to. Going forward, we're looking forward to the new MyCloud tools. So the question was on our cutover weekend, how long did it take? We told the business that the system was not going to be available for them the end of the business day, Friday, through the afternoon of Sunday, July 13th. And we were done ahead of schedule. I don't know exactly how many hours it was, but our data migration was 4 hours. And then we did all of our testing and validation and making sure the environment was good. Scott, it was like 12, 14 hours, something start to finish.
It wasn't very long.
Yeah, we moved everything. Yeah, we used the DMO process and started the data migration Friday after we turned everything off and replicated it all up. Obviously, we had done it several times, but we moved all of it all at once. Yes, sir. Yeah, our functional team would probably be the ones that, but if you want to get his contact information or mine, we can certainly connect you with that team that has that information. Yeah, so interestingly, I think we have in total in our entire environment close to 2,000 servers, right, when I took the job. And we still have something like 1,500 of them that need to be moved. So out of our on-premise data center. So far, today we've moved SAP, we've moved a couple of JD Edwards environments, we've moved a couple of DB2 based applications up to the cloud, and we now over the next 2 years will move everything else. So the question was, how?
So we don't, our SAP infrastructure is completely, we have nothing SAP like backup.
Right.
Solution manager, we just.
Yes. Now, there are some, obviously in that whole portfolio of other applications that we have running in our data center, we have basically our ESB engine, our data integration engine that is still running, that pushes and pulls data in and out of SAP as well as other applications. And we're doing all of that essentially over direct connect network connections that we have. But essentially our entire SAP estate is now in AWS. It's all on Hana. So I'll put Eamon more on the spot in terms of the data conversion. My understanding is the data, now that it's in Hana, is in Hana. The experience for moving to S4 would be more of a UI change, and the customizations that we need will need to be made and updated. But in terms of porting to S4, yeah, and again, our business is not yet asking for all of the functionality that comes with S4. Obviously, they're going to get more and more excited about it now that it's all ready and available. But when it was basically just the finance modules, it was not the sexy, interesting pieces. But as Eamon said, that's the reason why we went to Hana now, so that when the business is ready for S4, it's a complicated project, to be sure, to go from Hana to S4, but it's a far less complicated project than going from Oracle to S4. So we wanted to make sure that we were setting the stage to be able to get there in a reasonable amount of time, as opposed to having to tell the business to slow down. Because the other thing that comes into play for us is we continuously have acquisitions, and as we're doing acquisitions, getting them fully integrated into our SAP environment. If you can just imagine if we try to do it all big bang and go from Oracle to S4, we wouldn't have been able to do that in 12 weeks. Oh, they're not interested in that. Yes, sir. So we have a whole bunch of stuff that's peripheral systems, and everything comes with its own little interesting opportunities, but I wouldn't say we had any trouble with them. The CLM upgrade and what was the other one, Scott, that
So we BSI tax clear, we had those rolled on, so it went relatively seamless.
the
I don't remember an issue with it. Was that?
yeah. The BSI was a little bit bumpier because we needed some information from some folks at SAP. We had a licensing key issue that we needed, and so from a technical standpoint, it was not a problem getting the right key from the folks at BSI, and because we had to go through SAP, and that part that required some charm and finesse, but the technical pieces were not difficult. Really easy for me because I didn't do any of it. Yes, and so again, the asterisk that I put next to that 12-week migration, we started that Unicode code migration and code updates probably about 4 or 5 months ahead of, so that we could get all of those customizations and get the Unicode prep work all taken care of, so that when we started the SAP migration, then those wouldn't be an issue for us. So there's lots of things that are surprising, but the fact that we're an international company, we don't actually run our instance of SAP is the North American instance of SAP. Other countries in that Compass system are running their own instances of SAP. So there's lots of, interesting is a good word, but there's lots of those interesting concepts. Compass Group PLC has multiple instances. We in North America have one instance of SAP. Absolutely, we could certainly talk. So we basically we had a habit of running stuff that like run it till it's dead and wait till the provider's no longer going to support the version that you're on the hardware that you're on. That's essentially the scenario that we were on, particularly with our Canada instance of JD Edwards. But I'm certainly happy to talk more about that offline, but we'll make sure that if there's any other questions about SAP, we answer those. But separate projects. We actually had 2 separate projects of migrating both of our JD Edwards instances, and our SAP and JD Edwards instances are not directly integrated. We go through our ESB platform for all of our data integrations. Yes, sir. Yeah, so that's a great question. Of the things we considered, right? We when I got there, we basically hit the reset button and we said, all right, well, what does it look like and what's it going to cost us to stay on what we have, on-prem, on Oracle, on ECC6, on AIX hardware? What does that cost, and what are the RTOs and RPOs? What would those be? And all costs included basis administration and RDR scenarios. So we looked at that as our baseline, and then we considered, all right, if we migrate on-prem to on-prem, but go to a hyper-converged environment and stay on Oracle, what does that cost? And if we go on-prem to on-prem and migrate to Hana, what does that cost? And if we go to AWS, obviously staying as is not an option. So in AWS on Oracle, what does that cost? AWS on Hana, what does that cost? And then we looked at another well-known SAP, we'll call it private cloud solution, right? On Oracle or on Hana. And we basically did a comparative analysis on all of those. And what we found was that obviously if we stayed on Oracle, going to on-prem or AWS or the other public or private cloud provider, right? It would have been lower cost. We would have saved money moving to AWS or the private cloud provider versus continuing to support it in-house. If we moved to Hana, it was not going to save us money over our current on-prem cost to go to AWS. It was basically a wash. It would have been a little bit more expensive to go with the public cloud option. And if we wanted to stay on Hana and do it in-house, I just needed to sell my children for a couple $1 million, and then we could have gotten that hardware. It was way more expensive to try to run Hana on-prem ourselves versus going to AWS. So essentially, in the end, if cost savings would have been the driver for us, we could have left the environment as is, moved it to AWS, we would have saved money. But instead, we took it as an opportunity to not save money, spend essentially what we've been spending, but leverage all of the additional benefits, position ourselves for a simpler S4 migration when it comes time for us to do that. But yes. Yes, we would have saved money, and our RTO and our POs would have been exponentially better. Yes. Yeah, our AWS sales rep likes to tell me that I'm saving money all the time. Write me a check for $2 million and you're saving money. But no, we do appreciate Jackie's agree. That's right. And boy, am I saving now. My ex-wife used to say the same thing to me. She'd walk in the door and say, "You're not going to believe how much money I saved today." And I said, "I don't care how much I saved. How much did you spend?" That's what I really want to know. And Jack likes to tell me the same story. "You're not going to believe how much you're going to save." And then I have to ask him, how much is it actually going to cost me to save all that money? But it's great. He's a good salesperson. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Another good question. So we leverage Lemongrass for their migration services, and we are evaluating and leveraging their basis administration services as well coming out of. So at the onset of this project, we had 4 full-time basis administrators that were FTEs for us. We're down to 2, and we're leveraging their services. And essentially, the commitment that we made going into this project was post-go live, we'll run 12 months with a continuing de-reliance on our internal basis administrators, increasingly relying on the Lemongrass basis team. And as long as all goes well, then we hope to be out of the basis administration function altogether in another 8 to 10 months. So we don't do a lot of software development out of SAP. We have a number of other development teams across the organization that we're continuing down the path of leveraging our existing development teams in-house. We're not yet at a place where we're partnering with Lemongrass or anyone else for that custom development, application development. And when I say in-house, we have a mixture of full-time employees as well as onshored and offshored and nearshored and local contractors that we're leveraging. So we're already doing some interesting things in application development spaces. Any other questions? We have a ton of time, 31 seconds left. So we don't have any other SAP instances outside of the US. The global CTO has committed that we have a cloud-first strategy. So we actually partnered with the Lemongrass team after they had partnered with a couple of our other countries to set up. In one case, it was a greenfield instance of SAP. Another instance, it was a migration. So yes, ultimately, I would expect that every country that is running an SAP instance for Compass will ultimately move it to AWS. But no, we operate as a very interesting organization where we have a strong central corporate entity that's headquartered out of the UK. We operate as basically individual countries operate pretty much as individual companies, and then we just report financials and things back, but the data doesn't flow back to a central instance of SAP or anything else. Great. Well, thank you all very much for coming.